Hello and welcome back to Impact Factor. I am your host, Katie Van Aken, and we have a really special guest for you today. I'm really excited about this interview. Um, I had the absolute pleasure of talking to one of my old classmates, Amanda Pentecost. I call her Mander, but professionally she's Amanda. And she talks about kind of the different job paths she's been on to eventually find a place where she really enjoys what she's doing and can really use her PhD in a unique way. So I hope you enjoy. So we'll just all right. Well, let's jump in, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I am here with Mander, a good friend of mine. We went to Drexel together in grad school. And Mander, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. For those listening, my real name is Amanda. Mander
yes.
is a nickname.
Do you still go by Mander, out of curiosity?
I do with friends that have known me grad school and earlier, but it seems like professionally it's too much to explain that Mander is a nickname for Amanda.
I hear that. Whenever I get like put into a payroll or something, I'm always Catherine, and then I'm like, but you can call me Katie, and then it's confusing. So I totally get that.
I forgot that was your full name.
Yeah, right. So, all right, so let's start from the beginning. So, where did you go to undergrad?
So I was at Drexel in my undergrad. I started my undergrad in 2008. I was at Drexel for 9.5 years by the end of it.
Okay, cool. So that covers a couple of my questions already. So you did your grad program at Drexel as well. So did you kind of roll right into how did that flow go for you?
Yeah, so I joined the Gugotsi lab, same lab you were in 2008. So basically, I got to school, and being the super nerd that I was, I heard Yuri give a talk, and I was like, I'm gonna go work for him.
Love that.
I'm gonna jump in and start research. So, I had this notion going into college that I really wanted to be a researcher. And Yuri, opened his arms to me working in his lab, even just being a freshman, really not knowing how to do anything. And I worked under Vadim Machulin for several years until he moved on. So I was also in an accelerated program at Drexel called the BS PhD program, where hypothetically you were supposed to graduate with your bachelor's in 3 years and get your PhD after a total of 7 years. Exactly 0 people in that program did that.
I think the closest was 9. Existed. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. It was not well advertised, and they definitely phased it out because no one could hit those just ridiculous marks.
Yeah,
and if you go to Drexel, we wanted to take advantage of co-op, and it didn't really give you room to go to co-op, to do co-ops. So I did research co-op so that it could help me potentially graduate earlier. I did 3 research co-ops while I was in the Gugotsi lab. The first 2 were in the U.S., and I worked with Thomas Jefferson University and doing research on nanoparticle-based drug delivery systems, specifically using a material called nanodiamond. And I was working with the orthopedic department there, which is cool because that helped me later on in life when I did work in orthopedics for a couple of years, or for 4 years. Foreshadowing, but very early on, and I didn't see it, at the time. And so for my third co-op, I was lucky enough to go to Shanghai and do research there using this nanodiamond to treat brain tumors. So I had a really awesome experience. And so I was getting towards graduating, and I was in this accelerated program, but I was feeling a little bit burnt out. Like maybe, I kept getting the question, oh, you don't want to stay at the same school. Everyone kept saying it, quote unquote, looks bad. I don't know what that means because I know a lot of people that have done it.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I guess when you're looking for a job, I'm not really sure. I definitely haven't encountered that. I know so many people that have done it, but people would ask me, oh, why do you want to stay at Drexel? So I did look at other universities, specifically Northwestern. I was interested in working with someone who did nanoparticle or nanodiamond research there. But I ultimately decided to stay at Drexel. I felt like I was just really lucky and had such a supportive advisor he really encouraged time spending abroad, which is something that was going to be really important to me in my undergrad and in my grad experience. And it's not something that everyone has. So I know a lot of other people have talked about wanting to go abroad, and it's like really hard to convince your advisor to let you go. Whereas Yuri was like, please,
Yeah.
pick a country, please go there, because
Yeah,
he was just so
build
international.
connections, right? That was like all,
Exactly.
yeah.
Not just in the US. And he wanted you to like establish your own connections and not just leverage his. So I felt like honestly, if I was going to go somewhere else, it would be kind of like starting over. And I was in such a good position to stay in the Gagotsi lab. And what I ended up doing was I was working in the Gagotsi lab doing my materials research, but I was also being co-advised by Dr. Kara Spiller in biomedical engineering. So I got to learn most of my grad research was in her lab, taking all the material stuff I did in Yuri's lab and doing learning how to do like biomedical assays and testing. So learning a completely new set of skills. And again, I was lucky there because Kara was also incredibly into international research and wanted to send her students abroad. So I really felt like I hit the jackpot, and it would be very difficult to find that going somewhere else.
Yeah. That's so interesting because I feel like you said, you hit the jackpot, and so it was like when people were like what do you mean you want to stay? And you're like, why would I not stay? Like
Exactly.
it's a really good setup, and I think it's important that you thought about like looking elsewhere, but I also think there's tons of good reasons to look elsewhere. If there's someone you really want to work with, or you have, an advisor currently that's not the best fit for you, like making a change is the right thing. But also, like, if you have a good thing going, you're already kind of like you're hitting the ground running for your PhD, which is cool.
Exactly. Yeah. And I ended up doing nanodiamond research, just different applications the whole way through. And I just kept kind of building on my skills. So I said I went from like bench work in Yuri's lab, like doing pure chemistry, to by the end of my PhD, I'd learned how to do animal studies. So it was like I really
That's
felt
cool.
like I got a full breadth of knowledge that I don't know that I would have had that same experience somewhere else. And I'm glad that I did. I definitely wouldn't change anything.
That's great. I love to hear those stories. So technically, you got your undergrad in material science and your PhD in material science.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm also a degree collector. So I have 4 degrees from Drexel. And it
Nice.
looks when I used to have my own office, it was so obnoxious.
Yeah. People are like, we get
um,
it. You went to Drexel. Like,
yeah,
cool.
I still like bleed blue and yellow. And my brother is a biomedical engineer there now. So,
Perfect.
it makes it even worse. But I ended up getting my master's in biomedical engineering like on the way to my PhD because I felt like I didn't have enough bio knowledge to
Yeah.
really understand the assays and stuff I was doing. So I just took extra, I didn't do a master's thesis, obviously, but I just
Yeah.
took a lot of extra classes so that I could get a better understanding and really kind of like learn bio lingo because they speak a totally different language than we do in materials.
Oh yeah. I totally believe that. We had one biomed guy on already, Greg.
Greg Risser?
From yeah, from Carrot
Yeah,
Lab.
yeah, of
And
course.
and I'm sure we'll have more because um I know them pretty well. So here's another question for you. So I've talked a little bit about on previous episodes about my research, which was in energy storage, and as you mentioned, we were in the same lab, but we did very different things. So I was
Yes.
wondering if you could dive a little bit into your research.
Oh my gosh, it's been so long.
I mean, not just like maybe the applications,
Sure.
or
So,
what is
yeah.
nanodiamond? Let's start there.
Oh man, I try to forget. No, I'm just kidding. I spent 10 years working on it. So nanodiamond is, one a carbon nanomaterial. So I started this research back when Dr. Gugotsi was the carbon nanomaterial guy before he was the Maxine guy. Um, and this material, when you think of diamond, you think of something that's really stable. But diamond in its nanoform, when it's made by blowing up old TNT, basically, it has a lot of different functional groups on the surface. So it has chemistry that you can really kind of plug and play with. It's really easy to do whatever you want to the surface. So what I was working on was different types of functionalizations for the surface to attach different drugs. So I would make a hydrophobic surface because I wanted to attach a hydrophobic drug to it, and it would help with delivery if um, you have the two hydrophobic ends. Of course, the audience can't see me, but I'm making two hydrophobic tails
Putting the two
touching each
ends
other.
together. Yeah.
Yes, I'm putting the two ends together, and the hydrophilic tails are outside, so it's going to be soluble in the blood, or whatever organ it's going into. Um, but it was so that was like the basis of it. So I did a lot of characterization in terms of like drug loading. What was the maximum amount that we could get onto these things? Was it going to be enough for treatment? So I'd started off, like I said, just doing kind of the pure chemistry, and then I would hand it off to the biologists and say, okay, you test it. So and when I worked at Thomas Jefferson, I worked with their orthopedics department, and we were working on making a coating where we would fill titania, so TiO2 pores that were on titanium implants with the drug that was carrying an antibiotic to prevent biofilm infections. So that if someone was getting an implant, that it would automatically just kind of, as a preemptive measure, prevent infections from occurring. Then that was my first co-op, my first and second co-op. My third co-op, by that time I was working on absorbing a chemotherapeutic drug to the surface and characterizing that in order to treat brain cancer. So I would characterize the drug loading, but kind of hand it off to my bio counterparts who would do cell and animal studies. And then by the time I got to grad school, I did something completely different again, and I was doing the bio research and the chemistry research to deliver drugs to treat rheumatoid arthritis. So I was looking at loading like an anti-inflammatory drug, like a steroid, onto the surface and using that to change inflammatory cell behavior. It was cool because I knew the most bio about that one.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so interesting to me too because I don't know if you can answer this question, but I feel like you said you were a degree collector, but you're also kind of like a skills collector in this sense.
Yeah.
But was your motivation to like be able to do all of the things because you thought you'd maybe want to know them down the line, or because you wanted to do from start to finish this study that you were building? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think, at first it was just like, I want to acquire as many skills as I can. I know I want to work in biomedical research and I need to just learn everything. And I like learning. I think that's kind of a mark of a PhD. We're all huge nerds and we will never stop learning. But it wasn't really until I took a step back and looked at it and began to like piece together my story after graduating that I was like, oh, like this is what I actually learned. Like there is a story to tell here. And it really was kind of building. It wasn't like a random, I'm going to learn all these skills and figure out what to do with them later. It was really building on everything.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounded like when you were telling the story. So I was like, oh, that's interesting.
It was well thought out. It was not at the time. At the time, I would have just said like, I don't know. I just need to learn as much as humanly possible. Just
like
cram all the knowledge.
Show me this. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. What was I going to ask you next? So before we go on to post PhD, I would just want to get this correct. So you entered Drexel as a BS PhD student. So you knew earlier than most of us that you wanted to go the whole way.
Yeah.
Why? Or what made you?
So, I mean, I was always really interested in research. I'd never really got involved in it. It didn't really have a lot of opportunities like in high school. Like some people do, like, they might get involved as a high school student even, but I didn't have those opportunities. So I was excited to hit the ground running when I actually came in. I thought that, if I wanted to be a researcher, being a PhD was the best way to go. I did have quite a bit of pressure from my family also, who was like, oh, you want to do research? You have to get your PhD.
Right.
And then once you get into research for so long, everyone just tells you your natural progression is, oh, you like research? You should get a PhD.
Yep.
So I think that's what ended up keeping me with it. But I think in the beginning, I was just kind of going with like pressure, like, oh, this program sounds intense, but looking back on, I'm like, did I really know that I liked research? Because by the time I graduated, I hated research.
I know, right? That's the thing. But okay, so you were an optimistic, kind
Yeah,
of go-getter at that point, and you were like,
that's a good description.
here's a challenging program that I think I'm interested in. Let's try it, right?
Basically, yeah.
And at any point you could have like left with whatever degrees you had earned,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you could
So,
leave at any time. I didn't do any industry co-ops, so I didn't even know that that was like an option or experience. I often think if I had done an industry co-op, I might have gone into the field I'm in a little bit earlier, and may
yeah.
have foregone the PhD, but I don't necessarily regret the decision made.
Yeah. I hear that a lot that even though people aren't actively doing something that would have absolutely required a PhD, that they still don't regret the experience because we do learn a lot in the process. So,
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the biggest challenges that I faced was really understanding what my value was as a PhD going into a field where very few people have PhDs. I get really excited when I see a regulatory PhD. So I'm like, well, what's your story? Like, how did you end up here? Because
love that.
I just don't know that many people.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's back up. So, after you graduated, what did you do next?
So after I graduated, I hung around for a couple months to quote unquote wrap up some papers.
We've all heard those
And
words before.
yeah, which really meant basically have time to get a job. I
Get
did
a
wrap
job.
up the paper I was working on, but it was really to focus on trying to get a job and next steps. I did like a little bit of some studies here and there, but most of my main focus was like trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I applied to a lot of different things. I wasn't, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. I was really interested in regulatory and policy, so I applied to some fellowships and those things, but didn't get them. I applied to postdocs as well. I was offered two of them, but I really just didn't feel like my heart was going to be in it. One of them was like going to be doing, I forget what type of testing it was, like NMR or something, and that was going to be like my entire job. And I was like, I really liked the guy, and it was going to be research at the FDA actually, but I was like, I think I'll go insane if I have to do that every day. And so I started looking into like medical writing. Also, I
Mm.
wanted to do something that had a little more writing than bench work. And somehow I found Exponent, which is a technical consulting company. And I wasn't entirely sure what they did, honestly, when I was applying. Didn't really understand what consultants were or did. But I was hired, and at that point, I was just excited to get a job a whole 2 blocks away from Drexel.
Yep.
At that, so didn't have to really change that much about my routine. I was excited just to do something. So I worked primarily in medical device consulting, and I did use a lot of my material skills, but I was also in the lab a lot more than I thought I was. So half of my job was like technical consulting where I was doing lab work. So I was doing mechanical testing, or I was doing chemical characterization of like hydroxyapatite coating. So I had a really good introduction to the medical device world, especially orthopedics. And then on the other half of it, I was doing litigation support. So the medical device companies that were being sued for alleged deficiencies with their products, I was doing research to support or negate claims that either side was making. And I was looking at a lot of like regulatory documents and design documents and submissions, and I really enjoyed doing that, and literature reviews. That was the part that I really enjoyed doing from that job.
That's cool. That's cool. And so, were you ever like an expert witness on like the stand, or was it never
Oh,
that far?
you gotta have a lot of years in
Oh,
order
okay, okay,
to do
okay.
that. No, I wasn't
But
that high up.
that's
That's
what the company would do though, is provide an
yeah.
expert witness. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. So I would support things that like the expert witnesses there. So like the PIs, the principal investigators that were there, like I would put together things to like get them ready for if they had a
Gotcha.
deposition. And I would read depositions from patients, from industry. It was interesting having that experience, because I think now working in medical devices, it makes you really cognizant of, patient complaints, and
Yeah, I
you
was gonna
kind
say
of
like patient side.
right, you have to, it kind of humanizes things again. So it reminds me to always think about the end user.
Yeah. And you've also seen kind of what happens when things go wrong or are overlooked, and what, the regulatory piece plays in the life cycle of a medical device or whatever. And so,
For
you,
sure.
you've kind of seen it from all angles, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so
Yeah.
then what next?
So while I was at Exponent, like I said, I kind of got very interested in regulatory affairs. I joined the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. And I'm like, what is it going to take for me to transition into this role?
Yeah.
Actually, it was interesting because, going back to even when I was a sophomore and I was working with the orthopedics lab at Jefferson, they would ask me, oh, how do you know your material is biocompatible? And I'm like, oh, I don't know what you mean. Like, there's tons of literature that says that it is. But, like, I realized that, like, there was no standard test. That's, now I call it as academia being like the wild, wild west, because there are no standards, or very few standards that are used, because it's so exploratory.
Yep.
So that's really where I began getting interested in standards. And actually, Dr. Spiller connected me with the Nanotechnology Standards Committee towards the end of my grad school experience, and I got to meet with people from the FDA there, which was really awesome. So that's really, I started getting interested in it a lot earlier. I just didn't know how that would translate to a career path later on.
Yeah, very cool, very cool.
So I was applying for jobs like crazy, but it's so, the biggest challenge I would say that I faced was transitioning into this role, because I would constantly be overlooked by recruiters or by by hiring managers, because it's almost like they think you're too qualified, but I'm not, because I'm like, I have no regulatory experience, but I have this high degree. So it was really hard to get someone to take a chance on me. It really wasn't until I finished the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society's like dual certificate that I could put some things on my LinkedIn, and then I had a couple of recruiters reach out to me. I still swear that the only reason is I started putting keywords on my LinkedIn for the jobs that I wanted, rather than what my skills were. So that's usually the advice that I give people. Put keywords on your LinkedIn for the job that you want.
Yeah.
Because recruiters will use that and find you. And then all of a sudden it's like I did that, and then I had people contacting me like, oh, we have this open position, it's like entry level. Cool. I'm like, perfect.
Yeah.
So
yeah, does it feel weird? I feel like that's a situation that a lot of PhDs end up in when they want to make a pivot, like a slight pivot or a drastic pivot, but you end up being like, I need you to look at me as an entry level in this field that I want to go into, and you need to ignore the fact that I've been in school for my whole life.
Right. Yeah, I'm willing to start at the ground zero. Like, a lot of people, a lot of times they'll overlook you because they think that, like, oh, you're going to ask for too much money. I'm like, no, like, I don't care what I have to get paid. I want to get into this field. And it's very hard to communicate. Like, you can try to put in a cover letter, but how often does it get read? And I was lucky enough that I did get 2 interviews actually within the same week, ironically. And I was hired for the latter job, which was in orthopedics.
Cool. What was that job role specifically? Can you tell me? I don't know.
Yeah, so it was no, I worked at Conventus Flower Orthopedics. It was Flower, then it got acquired. It was interesting because I got hired right before COVID hit, and I was supposed to start at the end of March in 2020, and my start date got pushed back to June. And in that time, the person who was going to be my boss left. The company got bought. So I'm emailing every day like, oh my God, do I still have a job? Do I need to start applying for something else? I was panicking because I was so excited to start this job, especially in orthopedics, because I already felt like I had a really good understanding of it from Exponent. Like, being at Exponent really set me up for success at this job.
Cool.
And I finally did start, and they found someone to replace him. I had to interview again with the person who was going to be my boss there. And thankfully it was a really good fit. And then I started working there as a regulatory and quality engineer. And
Cool.
so I was actually working in regulatory and quality. I'd say most of my work ended up being in quality, but it was awesome. It was a tiny company, so I got to really learn how to do everything. And there was a ton of remediation that needed to be done. There were only like 3 of us in the department, so I really got to have my hands on everything. And really learn the business, everything to do with the business. Like my favorite thing about working there was that it was so small. So I knew everything that everyone in operations did. I knew everything that was going on in R&D and marketing because I would just talk to people constantly.
Even though you were in the middle of COVID, like were you guys all remote at that point?
When I went into the office in June for when I actually started, I was in the office.
Okay. And other people were too?
Yeah. I mean, it was like flexible that like if anyone was sick, you could work remotely. They
Yeah.
had like COVID time and stuff. I mean, it was flexible in that regard, but yeah, we were physically there. And honestly, I was happy to be there after being
Yeah.
home and unemployed for like several months. I was like, I need to get out.
Yeah. And that's the best way I think to onboard a new job too, is like in person and meet people and learn,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know.
I can't imagine people starting jobs and just being completely remote and you really just like don't know your coworkers. Like you can't
Yeah.
get I think it's got to be at least incredibly difficult to get comfortable that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, oh, I forget what I was gonna say something else. Hmm. Okay, well, anyway, it'll come to me. So you liked that job. Oh, it's a small company thing. I was gonna say, I also give advice to people who are interested in working in a small company, even just for a few years, like because if you're not really sure that you're in the right field, a small company will give you exposure, like you said, to all of the departments, all of what a company does, and you'll even like maybe get a chance to work with the operations and the R&D and like you'll sort of see where you might fit while also getting paid to do your own job. So,
Right. Yeah, my boss had described it as like you're not as siloed. Like there's
yeah.
you end up helping and like I helped with inventory like management.
Nice.
Which is, completely not what I would usually do, but I just wanted to learn the things. I think I totally agree. A small company is fantastic for that. I actually
Yeah.
really like that. I don't know if I could ever work at like a huge company just because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people love the huge company vibe and I get that too. But yeah, I'm with you on that. Um okay, so then what happened?
So I was there for a little over 2 years, and I had a fantastic team. I loved everyone that I worked with, but I really want to get my regulatory affairs credential. So it's kind of like, a PE is like you get some letters after your name after passing a test. It's similar to that, but for regulatory
Okay.
affairs. So you get your RAC, regulatory affairs credential. And I've known people that have taken the test, and the feedback was like, if you haven't worked in regulatory affairs for X number of years, you're not going to be able to pass the test. Like, it's very experiential. And a
Hmm.
big part of that test was OUS, so outside the US, some regulatory submissions. And the company I was
Okay.
working for was only in the US. So I wasn't getting that. So I started kind of casually looking, maybe if there was a really good opportunity that I really couldn't refuse. Because, like I said, I loved my team. My team was
Yeah.
amazing. It's what kept me. It like got me up in the morning, and it's
Yeah.
so. I'm not, and there's. I can't say like enough good things about having a good team.
Oh.
Um, yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, and I love my team so much. So my boss had actually ended up leaving in March of this year to go to neuronetics. And I
Oh.
saw that there was an opening at her company to work under her again. And I just felt like there was so much more that I could learn from her. I loved her mentoring style. And I'm like, all right, I'm not done learning yet. And so I applied and was ultimately hired at neuronetics back in May now. It feels like I've been there forever with the amount of work that I've done and the amount of that I've learned in such a short period of time.
So, did they have the OUS experience that you were looking for too?
Yes, yes, I'm working on, as soon as I got there, I started working to get CE marking in the EU. Currently working with Japan and Korea to get some devices cleared, like basically new versions of our current device cleared there. We're going into a new market next year, I believe. So I'm trying to do research into like, hey, what do I need to be able to do that? It's it's been a lot. It's but it's really cool because I'm kind of just thrown into it. My boss is just like, "Go, you are the expert
Yeah.
now. I will help you when you need it. Like, let me know, but you can learn and tell me what resources you need and I'll support whatever it is."
That's cool because I feel like that exactly what you just described is kind of how I think of the PhD to advisor mentality, where it's like, I know you can go learn something, so, go do it, and then, come back and see me, we'll talk about it.
Right. You have those like
And
guardrails.
yeah,
I think a good advisor will give you those guardrails, but encourage you to be independent, like you said.
yeah. So I feel like a lot of, maybe some of that experience you got from your PhD, makes you successful with your current boss, who sounds like, gives you that freedom to just be the expert.
Right. Yeah, I think also just being in my PhD, I learned what type of mentor that I really like.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Um, I like know that I need a kind of a balance of hands-on and hands-off. Like I can't be with like if someone's too hands-off, then I don't feel supported. But if someone's too hands-on, then I feel like they're not letting me learn. So having that happy medium for me anyway, I know that there's a lot of PhDs that just like are totally fine with something hands off, or they really need the hands on, especially if someone's coming into a PhD and is totally lost when it comes to research. I know a lot of people like that are just like, okay, I need the extra help. But I've definitely learned that entire experience through gaining 9 million different mentors during my PhD process, like what I like, what I don't like.
Yeah, and you carry that into your career path, which is cool because
Absolutely.
mentors are really important for your career path as well.
Absolutely. I would not be able to succeed without that.
How is the regulatory department at this current company
It's,
bigger?
it's smaller. Well,
It's
it's just
smaller?
me and my boss currently. I think she's
Oh,
mentioned
wow.
today
Okay.
that she might hire someone next year just because we're really expanding and we are just going to have a lot more work. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of like, is it going to be someone under me? Is it going to be someone on the same level or higher? I'm not really sure what that's going to look like.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of fun. You'll be like you'll be the mentor for
Yeah.
whoever comes in.
Yeah, I've gotten a little bit of experience with that at my last job. So actually I was promoted to a manager while I was there like a little over a year. And so I actually ended up having like 3 direct reports there and I really liked it. Like I love being a mentor. I love teaching. Like
Yeah.
my whole life I was, my whole research life you're told, "Oh, you're going to be a professor." Because that's what everyone just assumes every PhD does. And I'm like, "Oh, but
Yeah.
I love teaching. Like I still really want to be an adjunct professor for something to do with regulatory affairs or chemistry."
That's great. I mean, that's such an important link too that I feel like gets lost in even in research, so being able to make that link and teach a course like that, you, you should be sought after by
I'm
those
looking.
universities.
Yeah, hire me.
Um, so you have to still take your certification, right?
Yeah, I'm going to. So I just got approval for funding for like some of the resources to like study. Um,
Hmm.
through my company will pay for it in like the beginning of next year.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm so glad that saves a ton of money because when I originally took the first certificate course, I paid it was like 3 or 4 grand, and I paid for that out of pocket. So to have a company that's
Yeah.
supporting like and is aligned with my goals is definitely really helpful. It makes you feel like they're investing in you.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's great. Um, so this is gonna be an off-topic question, but now that I mean, you've been working for a few years now, have you, what do you do outside of work? What are some fun things that you do?
Well, outside of work. Yeah, I mean, I still feel like at my core, I'm like a language nerd and I love traveling.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, so my husband is Bosnian and he's fluent in like Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian. They're all one language and German. So I do spend a lot of time trying to figure out what he's saying. I'm pretty good at it now. Especially because we want to, when we eventually have kids, we want to be able to pass that down to them. And I don't want them talking and me not knowing what they're
about
saying.
you.
Yeah,
Yep,
exactly.
yep.
I'm pretty good. Actually, I took Russian in undergrad, like a year of Russian, because all of the nanodiamond research was in Russian. So I wanted to have that.
Yeah.
And Yuri and Vadim both spoke Russian, so I'm like, I should learn Russian. Incredibly invaluable, like random thing that ended up being invaluable because the languages are incredibly similar. So I still feel like I'm a huge like language nerd, like kind of randomly outside of work. But other than that, kind of normal hobbies. Like I'm like, wow, I'm getting old. Like I like gardening, and I just got a new.
No, that's totally good. That's
It
fine.
makes me feel so old though. Like
I know.
I got a new
It's a
bike
good workout
though.
though.
Oh my gosh,
A new
yes. We just did mulching and like cutting like trees. Well, it was mostly me. The other weekend I was like, I am dying. But
Yeah,
lately
exactly.
we got like I got a bike for my birthday. My husband got me a bike. So
Oh,
we've been going to a lot of like state parks. We have a little dog basket for my dog.
that's cute.
Yeah, you can see him
Do
in
you
the
get to
back.
travel with your current job at all?
I haven't gotten to that much. Last year when I was at my old job, I went to Germany.
Okay.
This current job, I haven't really gone anywhere yet. There'll probably be some opportunities. That's part of why sometimes I'm like, oh, why didn't I go into academia? Because,
So much
one of my
travel.
best friends, Val, is a biomedical engineering or a professor at Rutgers, and I think you know Val.
I
and
do.
and she travels like all the time. So she's like posting pictures of like Switzerland or something. Like, why didn't I stay in academia? Get to go to all
I
these cool
know.
places.
And those are things to keep in mind too. Like if you are a big traveler and you also enjoy academia,
I
but
enjoy
I
teaching,
also know,
not research.
yeah, not research. There you go.
And that's
So,
what's taking people places. It's not the teaching, it's the research.
exactly.
But I mean, I think there are some opportunities, especially like because we have international partners. We're just kind of still in the introduction phase to them. So I mean, I think
Yeah.
eventually we would go over to like meet them. So it'd be me returning to Korea, which would be amazing, and Japan, and the EU. I think I'm okay with that. I'm okay with just doing traveling, for fun.
That's good too. Yeah, because I mean, I feel like we traveled a lot, or I traveled a lot in grad school
Yeah,
actually
me
to
too.
conferences, and it was kind of like my introduction to traveling
Oh
because I feel
yeah,
like I didn't do much before then,
no, me
and it
either.
was like exhausting sometimes. It would be like, you're gone for a week, but like that week is spent like every minute of every day is like scheduled, and then
Right?
you come home and you're going to another conference, and it's just like I sometimes there's got to be a balance, and I think traveling for fun is a good way to make that balance.
Yeah, I would usually use the fact that like, oh, you paid for me. Like I remember Yuri paid for or the lab paid for me to go to England to meet with colleagues at the University of Brighton. And my family's in England. So I was like, oh, I'm just gonna tack on vacation time to this. So
Yep.
that's like what the key of what you really have to that's yeah, to all the listeners, that is the key. Go on a conference,
Yeah.
tack on some vacation days so you get to actually enjoy where you're going because
Yeah, and
the best
see
way.
see the city that you're visiting, not just like the inside of the convention center.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, I've been to Phoenix and I, like, barely saw any for MRS and I barely saw anything.
Yep. We did that. We went to Hawaii for the Electrochemical Society meeting, and we a bunch of us stayed a couple days, and we did like snorkeling
Good.
and because like when are you gonna travel to Hawaii? Like it's such
Exactly.
a
And
long
it's paid
flight.
for. Yeah. And it's so
Yeah.
expensive. It's difficult to pay for that yourself and to find time. So, I mean,
Yeah.
take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's definitely a good tip. Um, okay, so here are my the big questions I've been asking everybody. So one of them is, what was one of the challenges you faced? I guess for you, your PhD started when you became an undergrad, but early on in your experience, what was something challenging about the PhD process?
Staying focused and motivated. I experienced burnout really early because I was doing research for so long. So I think for me, it was definitely challenging finding new ways to stay engaged in my research. And I think the way that I did that was going to that biomedical engineering lab and saying, okay, well, I'm going to learn something new. So I'm not just doing the same FTIR or ramen, day after day. So I can look forward to learning something new, even if I wasn't necessarily in love with my research topic or whatever, I could still get something out of the experience.
So varying your day-to-day or your current task, you're still working with nanodiamond, let's say, but you're learning a different characterization technique or something that kind of spices it up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Keep it fresh.
Keep it fresh. Well, it's hard when you've been there at the same school for 10 years, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was difficult, but I'm glad that I don't even remember how I came across that opportunity. I think I just approached Kara Spiller, who was actually also in the BF PhD program at Drexel. So and
Whoa.
she spent time in Shanghai. So we both had that in common. So I was glad that connection was made, because I think I don't know that I would have been able to make it through just doing the same thing. Like I was pretty burnt out by that point.
What's good too, and I don't know if there are any like professors listening, but I think I applaud her for being open to like bringing you on board as someone from a different field, loosely, because I think having people from different, having different expertises in your lab trying to solve similar problems is like the best you could ask for.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I feel like some professors would be like, "Oh, you're not a biomed, like I don't want you,"
Right.
But
No, she was I know that she was very, like, I'm pretty sure she has like a statistician or someone who does like bioinformatics in her lab now, because she just saw that as like, this is like, so for me she was like a materials engineer that's going to fill a gap, like instead of being like, oh, it's going to be too tough to train you,
it was different. Yeah,
you view it in a different mindset, that you're filling a gap.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, good answer. So the answer was staying focused.
Stay focused.
Next question. If you had to give your younger PhD seeking self advice, what would it be?
I would say don't try to focus so much on trying to stick to the narrative that everyone else gives you. So I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I feel like a lot of PhDs and a lot of people in research are basically just kind of, professors seem to just assume that we're all going to go into academia. We're all going to do postdocs and we're all going to get professorships, but that's just not the reality. And I think it was a little bit damaging because I didn't really know what else was out there. And I just kind of always assumed like, oh, well, I'm going to be a professor. And then all of a sudden I was graduating. I was like, but I don't want to do that. Like, but what else is there? Like, I didn't know. I would have, I would tell myself, like, just be open, like go to like industry, like seminars, because your PhD could be valuable, just as valuable in industry. And I would tell myself, just, focus not on the end goal of like graduating, but not so much on fitting one path. Try to be open to as many paths as possible.
Yeah, and especially like recognizing that as early as possible, then you take advantage of all of those years that you're, getting your degree and following the path, but you're also like keeping your ear out for like the other paths that you could possibly go.
Right, because you might like something completely different. You don't know.
I think that's one of the things that we're getting, maybe the atmosphere is getting better, but I still think like I also still don't know like all the things I could do with having a PhD. You know, it's just like it's
No,
hard to know because you're surrounded by people whose path was PhD postdoc professor, you know, and
exactly.
they're the people who are mentoring you and they don't know
Yep.
any different. And so, you know, I'm hoping maybe this podcast will help, but just to kind of hear from people who took a different path and are succeeding is can be just as helpful.
Yeah, that was like the number one thing when I saw you were starting the podcast, that I was like, that's going to be the most valuable, is letting people know, like, hey, it's okay to not just do a traditional path. You can do a traditional path, and that's great, and it's very competitive, and it's awesome when you can break through and
Yeah.
do it. But there's so many other options. I mean, I know several people that are in sales. Like, I
Yep.
would have never
Yep.
thought that as a PhD that anyone would, especially a PhD in engineering, going to do sales. Or
I
I know
know.
someone else who got his MBA, and he doesn't even do anything with his PhD now. I think he works like completely. He was another Gagotsi lab grad. I don't know if you knew Murat, but
Oh yeah, he was before me, I think.
yeah, he got his MBA. He actually was one of the people that, when you were talking earlier about having a PhD and how it could hurt you, he actually took it off his resume, and he asked
Yep.
the whole like our materials department to take his name off websites, because he wanted to get a job in like banking, like something that was like complete, or like investments or something completely different than engineering. And he said that, oh, these business people, they think that having a PhD means like you're not like socially capable,
Mm.
especially in engineering. So I
Yeah,
I
I
thought that
mean,
was interesting. I mean, that's what he felt like he had to do to pivot, which stinks because no one should have that notion. But
yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. I know someone too who took it off their resume to get a job. I don't know if it's because they were pivoting so much, but just because they were having trouble getting a job. Again, with the PhD meaning like I'm too qualified for these jobs and you need to pay me all that much more. You know, it's how about I could do the job, you know.
yeah, I mean, we're
Let's go with
highly
that.
skilled, like, and we're incredibly smart, and we want to learn. Like, we're incredibly valuable. You just need to be able.
Yeah.
The hardest thing is just getting that chance.
Yeah. It's funny you say the sales thing because I once gave a presentation, I think it was to like industry at Drexel, and afterwards the guy was like, I could see you in sales. And I was like, do you realize what I'm like? I'm okay, fine, whatever. And then I've never stopped thinking about that because I was like, what does that mean? Why did he say that? You know? I guess it's because I could sell my research, you know?
Yeah, I mean, thinking back on it, like I specifically think of Claire Witherall in it was in Kara Spiller's lab. Has fantastic, like, her communication skills are amazing, and she went to do a postdoc after she graduated, and I remember being like, no, like, you need to be in something where you're communicating to like a
Yeah.
broad audience, because you have such a great skill for that. And now she's a medical science liaison. So I was like,
There you go.
good. Or
She
like,
won the 3-minute thesis competition because she was so good at
yes, she's
communicating
a
her.
fantastic
Yeah.
communicator. I'm like, I just felt like I was, I mean, I know that it helps, of course, in PhD in academia to be a good communicator, but it was cool to see her, be able to use her skill for something, completely different too.
Yeah. Very cool. All right, last question. Um, do you have a fun story or memory from your time there? Time there. Time getting your PhD. I know it was a long time ago, but
Oh, yeah, right. No, I mean, in general, I had such good memories. I was trying to, think of something very specific, but I would just say, like, I just have a really good general memory of working specifically in the Gagotsi lab, and I'm sure you definitely got the same out of it that I do. It was just such a positive environment. Like, I felt like people just really wanted to help each other. And my favorite thing was that there was people from all around the world. So, like, when I
mm,
joined, I went to Catholic school my whole life. Like, there was not very much diversity until I went to Drexel. And then I went to the Gagotsi lab, and I was like, wow, I'm like, everyone who worked there was from a different country. And it was amazing to be able to hear their stories. Like, yeah, we're doing lab work and I'm learning, and that's a really valuable experience, but I'm also learning about the world and like struggles that other people have. Like,
Mhm.
Like yeah, Murat, my friend from Turkey, was talking to me about like government corruption in Turkey that I'd like never heard. Like you have to pay, you have to, police can like pull you over and you're supposed to like bribe them. Like I'd never heard of that before. Vadim, you know, like had such hard time getting a job as a scientist in post-Soviet Ukraine that he left his family, his wife and his son behind so that he could make a lot more money and send it home. Like in the US, these are stories that like I'd never heard of before. And also, of course,
Yeah.
we benefited because we got to eat all the amazing food ever.
Yeah. Yeah, we had tons of group parties with all the food from all over the world. Very
Yes.
very spoiled.
I just love that. It was just such a good environment. I just love seeing where people are now and celebrating everyone, even if I don't
I
necessarily talk to them a lot.
Yeah, I had forgotten some of that, and now that you're saying that, like I remember having a conversation with Mohammed. You remember Mohammed, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking of him earlier. Yeah, today too. I was like, yeah, like
He
Momo, the only person that I knew that was from Libya.
I know, and he was like my father and his father, they were barbers, and when you're a barber, you get the hot gossip in the town, and so that's the job you want because you just listen while you're cutting people's hair. And I was like, I would never have thought that, like it was
Right?
so interesting. Ah,
Yeah,
very cool.
it's totally different. It was so cool. I don't think I'll ever be in an environment like that again,
Yeah,
just because of my nature of work. But man, I'm so grateful for it.
yeah. I think everyone should have that type of experience in grad school or elsewhere, but
And
it
embrace
really
it.
opens your
You
eyes.
know,
Yeah,
yeah. Like don't be nervous about it and don't be closed-minded about it, but really embrace it.
yeah. I love that. Um, well, that's all my questions. Anything else? Anything you want to plug?
Oh, I don't know. The LinkedIn
The
thing, I think,
FDA?
yeah. No, they don't need any plugs. Everyone knows what they do. Yeah, the US Food and Drug Administration for anyone in like electrochemistry or something that's like, what is that again?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I've
yeah, reiterate the LinkedIn thing if you want.
yeah, I
That's a good
really
tip.
just wanted to emphasize that if you're looking for a job or an internship or something, that like really updating your LinkedIn, because so many recruiters use that now to like kind of put keywords into like, oh, you want to work at a pharmaceuticals company, like you can add keywords, like add like pharmaceuticals or
Yeah.
quality or CMC or something like that. If that's the route you want to go, I think it's so helpful.
What part of your LinkedIn profile, like your
They have like skills
previous job descriptions or skills? Okay.
skills. I mean, anything that like someone's gonna type in and it's gonna pop up
Search.
your profile.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good tip. It's a good tip. LinkedIn is very powerful. I'm always surprised when people who are in grad school don't have them. Because I think the earlier you do, the more you start to cultivate those networking
Yeah, I had an intern at my
relationships.
last job, and I'm like, why haven't you set up your LinkedIn yet? My husband is like in his mid 30s and hasn't set up his LinkedIn yet, and he was in sales too, which was even crazier. I'm like, how do you
That's
like connect
surprising.
with clients? Yeah, exactly. Now he's in consulting. Ironically, like we switched places, but
Weird.
he's automotive consulting though, but
Different.
completely different, but still similar, and at least to what I did at Exponent.
Yeah. Well, it was really good to talk to you.
I know it was great to catch up.
Definitely.
I hope
I
this was
know.
valuable for your listeners, and I'll be sure to
Oh,
share it with my network as well.
yeah, that'd be great. I one of the like most fun things about this has been reconnecting with people and
Of
like
course.
having these conversations and being like, "Oh, remember that time?"
Yes.
Or remember that person, and so it's been, selfishly that's been good for me, but also yeah, I've gotten good feedback. So
Also, if Mohammed listens to this, he's gonna be like, "Oh my God, she called me Mama." I'm surprised
I'll
you
have to
didn't.
send this.
That was your name for him.
I know, Momo. Oh man, I haven't talked to him in so long. I miss him. I miss a lot of those guys.
Yeah,
Ah,
they had
good
like a mini
times.
reunion because of all the people who are still doing vaccine research at the vaccine conference recently. I was
Oh,
like, did you
I
stop
saw
by?
Kelsey,
Oh
um,
wow.
and Majid and Michael.
Oh wow. Yeah, I knew they were
Yeah.
all there. I would have loved to see
Yeah.
them. I know Kelsey's close now. She's in Princeton.
Yeah, she is, but she lives in the city, so.
In Philly?
Yeah,
All right.
I know. That commute, I know.
She's crazy, but if she likes it, she likes it.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks again, Mander. I'm gonna call you that. I can't call you Amanda. It's so weird.
That's fine. You have permission.
Okay,
Old school
thanks.
friend.
And I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, it was great connecting. Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you again. Bye.
Thanks to Mander for coming on the show. If you or someone you know wants to be interviewed on Impact Factor, feel free to reach out via Instagram and follow us for updates at @ImpactFactorPod. Thank you all for listening and have a great week.